deployed to the southern border as part of recent border security operations?
Yes, sir. As of this morning, we had 155 Coast Guard members that are down there. Medical team, general purpose, helping on the border. We have a helicopter that is occasionally flying from Corpus Christi, and some small boats that are running up and down the Rio Grande, sir.
And what would that typically be? What does that represent in terms of what would normally be deployed? Is anything normally deployed from the Coast Guard to
No,
that
sir.
mission?
This is unique. But
So that is a new mission for the Coast Guard.
This is why there is a Department of Homeland Security. We are helping our shipmates in CBP and Border Patrol, just as their P3s helped us in the hurricane last fall and last summer. We're helping them out. Out of a force of 42,000 active, 8,000 civilian, and 6,600 reserves, I think 155 is a reasonable number, sir, and we're not seeing a huge impact on our operations.
I understand. What would those personnel normally be doing?
Sir, the helicopter crews are deploying out of Corpus Christi. That's their home. The boat crews are from maritime safety and security teams from all around the nation. They're bringing boats and bringing their capacity down there. As far as the general purpose that are helping in the actual processing centers, those are volunteers from around the Coast Guard.
And let me ask you a different version of Mr. Garamendi's question, because I don't want to put you on the hook for making policy decisions that aren't yours to make, or that you're simply in the position of having to implement, and quite properly so. That's your job. But if I gave you $1 billion in addition to the $11 billion you've requested, what would we do with that $1 billion?
Sir, it would have to be a mix of operations and recap, because both of those are what we're struggling with right now. The day-to-day maintenance of aging assets, getting what we need for our workforce, as well as buying the future of the Coast Guard. So it would be recap as well as operations.
And if I gave you $1 billion simply for drug interdiction efforts specifically, so forget the polar cutter and the other things that we all care about up here as well, but if we were just talking about drug interdiction, if we were talking about border security more broadly, what would the Coast Guard do with $1 billion?
Sir, I mentioned the offshore patrol cutters. We have got to get after that. That is those medium endurance cutters, 70% of the presence. They are aging, they're expensive, we're losing operational days on those. We have to get after that. Aircraft, I mentioned the triangle, intel, aircraft, patrol aircraft, and then the helicopters on the back of the cutter, as well as the small boats on the back of the cutter. All of those need investment.
Well, your entire drone program is $117 million, isn't that correct? The entire drone program, the UAS we were speaking about earlier, it's $117 million at this point, right?
Yes, sir. That's a multi-year contract, though. That's not just this year, but it's an investment in the future. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Great point. So how many years is that over?
I can get back with you. I believe it's a 7-year contract, but I can get back with you on the terms of the contract. I'm not the
Fantastic.
acquisition.
So we could increase our unmanned aerial capability by an order of magnitude with several $100 million, let alone $1 billion. Fair to say, right?
We would need the afloat platforms that they operate from, though. The smaller cutters don't have the room to have a UAS and a helicopter, and certainly the armed helicopter is part of the takedown.
I understand the complexity, Admiral. I'm talking about $1 billion. We could have contractor-owned and operated systems that don't even involve Coast Guard ships, right? We could have a series of platforms out there, or barges, or contractor-operated vessels that were operating drones that were just feeding intelligence to the Coast Guard Operations Center, JIADF, right? I mean, you'd be happy to have the data, right? And if we were better at distinguishing it, we could increase the number that Admiral Poland's talking about if we also had the assets to go get them. Isn't that fair to say?
Yes, sir. And as I mentioned, we already have experience with the MQ-9 with the joint unit that we have with Customs.
In fact, one of the great capabilities you have are those kids who run those boats out and shoot the motors out of those drug vessels. I got to meet some of them. But when you think about it, there's no reason we couldn't do that with an unmanned platform in the future. Isn't that correct? With the right eyes-on human operator, but remotely operating an armed drone, we could do that too, couldn't we?
Sir, I really don't want to speculate about use of force. It took a lot to get Department of Justice approval for the armed aircraft that we have and the accuracy of our marksmen, and to make sure that there's no collateral damage when we do employ use of force.
Yeah, that's right. But a kid in the back of a boat with a gun shooting out a motor is not a lot different than a kid with a joystick operating a gun on a drone. Just for the record, but because they're both highly trained and highly capable and follow extraordinarily rigid procedures around use of lethal force. So, Mr. Patton, just put in a plea for the fact that the point Mr. Garamendi, I believe, was trying to make is that these dollars we're throwing at border wall construction that are coming out of other military priorities are desperately needed in the drug war that is being fought right now by the gentleman to your left. But I see my time has expired. Mr. Gibbs.